Welcome to the oral history of criminology. We're here at the Academy of Criminal Justice Sciences meetings in New Orleans in 2018. I'm pleased to be with Dr. Tom Barker, a distinguished criminologist who's done all kinds of things over his career, and we're going to talk a bit about that over the next period of time. And Tom, you've had a remarkable career. When you look at it, you've written 10 plus books. You've started off as a practitioner, and you're still writing at a very high rate. So we want to share with the viewers some of your influences, your motivations, and what makes you tick as a human being. So let's start at the beginning. You were born right at the outset of World War II in Birmingham, Alabama.
No, Brooklyn, New York.
Okay, tell me.
I was born in Brooklyn, New York, and my father moved down to Birmingham at the end of the war for, they would open up an airplane manufacturer there in Birmingham, and he moved down there to go to work in Birmingham, and we went with him.
Okay, so how long were you in Brooklyn?
6 years.
Oh, 6 years. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And but you consider Birmingham your hometown?
Yes, I do. Birmingham's my hometown.
Yeah, your hometown. Yeah, I got that. And you went to high school there, and you would describe your childhood as what, ordinary, or how would you describe?
No, I would. One of the things, and I think it influences my later life.
Yeah.
At that time I grew up in the segregated South, and when in the area that we lived on the south side of Birmingham. It's a rough section of town. And there I knew people that been in and out of prison, and as growing up, and I hung around with a pretty rough crowd too. And I saw one of the things that influenced me a lot. I saw a lot of Klan activity there.
Oh, really?
And it was disturbing at the time, but not near as much as it became later in life. And I always think that that early background changed me. I only had a high school education when I got out of the service, and I went to work for the Birmingham Police Department. And I did that for a very rational reason. It was the best job I could get with a high school education, and it was the most secure job. So I went to work with them, and I saw a lot of things, and I put a lot of it in writing that just amazed me. And like I said, I grew up in a hard neighborhood, but I was one of those boys that I was a boxer when I was in high school. And when the gang members or the guys that I hung around with would go, get in trouble, I wouldn't, and they couldn't force me because they couldn't whip me. So my Catholic background, kept me from getting in real trouble.
Yeah.
And my mother and dad, worked real hard with my brother and I did. So anyway, when I went on the police department, and I'd been there a few years when LEAA, education.
Yeah, Law Enforcement Assistance Administration.
Yeah, when they started paying for police officers to go to school. And I've always thought, through life there are things that, happen that change your life, and you didn't know they would, and you didn't freely choose it either. But I started going and getting the grants and the loans because I make more money doing that than working an extra job. And I remember my first class I took was juvenile delinquency, and I couldn't spell it. So at that time, I got a little notebook, and I started writing down all the words that I couldn't spell or didn't understand. And at the end of the week, I would look them up, and write. And then I didn't need notebooks anymore.
Right. So the vocabulary gets quite good.
And then when I was in college, I realized there was a different world out there. And some of the things that we as police officers were doing to the blacks was not right. And one of the things I think in the 60s that changed policing is that cadre of officers, they asked the one question that segregationists cannot answer: why? And we used to, I started asking the lieutenants and the sergeants and all that, why are we doing this?
Yeah. What's the
And
point?
then they'd say because they're in, and they don't. And I remember when I left the police department to get my PhD, I told them I'm going to write about all this, when I get the chance. And that's what I've been doing.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you were on the police department, what, 6 years altogether?
Yeah.
And very important historical note, you were part of the search party for the 3 missing civil rights workers
Down in Mississippi.
down in Mississippi. Now, was that while you were on the police force? That
No,
was
actually,
different?
I was stationed with the Navy at Naval Air Station Meridian.
Okay.
And we were called, I was in charge of a short patrol, went out looking for them. And, I was raised in the South, but that was a part of the South I never knew existed. And that's when I first, I'm now into researching killer cops. That's cops that kill murder, premeditated murder. That's when I first met the first killer cops, those Klansmen. In fact, I got in an argument with a Klansman down there, and he left a 3-inch scar on the back of my head. And then he walked around the rest of his life like this because I ran his arm through a plate glass window. So that's, I've hated the Klan. I've been on the Klan's hit list twice in my life.
Really?
Yeah. And I just said something's got to be done about this.
It is very interesting because here you are, you graduate from high school, you go to the service, you become a police officer, as you say, because that was the best paying job you could get with a high school diploma. And then what, the LEAA program gave you an incentive to go to college. And it seemed to, but your attitudes were already well in place. In other words, you didn't quite fit into the local culture, especially policing at that time.
That's right.
And I mean, that had to be a big shock to you, that all of a sudden, I'm part of this police agency that's doing stuff that doesn't make any sense at all to me.
Well, the department was changing that too, because there was a lot of guys now that were asking why.
Okay, good. Okay, so the culture was changing.
And I don't know how to phrase this. I remember after my boys were born, my first 2, the biggest argument I ever had with my mother is one day at the table she used the N-word, and both my boys were at the table. I said, "Don't you ever use that word again in my house." And she says, "You know who you're talking to?" And I said, "Yes, I do. And don't ever use that word in my house again." Because I said, I grew up listening to it, but they're not going to. And it just, and also, at the time when I was going, I was meeting people, I'd never been around blacks. I'd never been around anybody. Again, except when I was in the service, of course I was, But, and one of the things that I was telling some people earlier last night, while I was a cop, you have to keep copious notes on the cases, Well, I started writing journals of what happened during the day. And I'd go home, write, what happened during the day. I still have those journals.
Get out, really?
And what I do now with those journals is I write short stories and novels using them as a basis.
You've always been a very prolific writer throughout your life, and the question was, well, where does that come from? I mean, your ability to use writing as a way to express yourself, is that a family thing, or how did you get
Well,
that?
I think that my dad he only went through the 5th grade, but he read everything he get his hands on. He learned everything from a book. And he told me when I was just a kid, he said, you can learn anything you want if you get a library card and start reading. And then when I started reading, then he would say, now you need to try. So my dad was the one.
Okay, who pushed you in that direction? Because you started from a very early age writing, and you just kept going. I mean, which is really kind of unusual. Another interesting point for me is that you ultimately started your college experience as a police officer. You get your bachelor's degree from Stanford University, but then you decide to go on for your master's. Now, what made you want to continue going on?
Well, really, I did want to, and I had a lot of people along the way that helped me,
Mm-hmm.
I remember even when I was in junior college, my sociology teacher, I love her to death. I used to go back all the time and visit with her. She would just say, "You can do better. Just keep going." And see, I started out in police administration at junior college. She said, "Don't do that."
Mm-hmm.
She says, "Go into sociology." At that time, I said, "I don't want to be no damn pinhead sociologist." So I did. I went into sociology. Then when I went out to Stanford,
Mm-hmm.
transferred from junior college to Stanford, there were several professors there that told me, "No, you can do better. You can go on to get a PhD." And I said, "Are you out of your mind?" And they said, "No, try it." So I got a PhD fellowship
Mm-hmm.
to Mississippi State, or they got me one.
Okay.
And I left the department, and I could have gone back.
Right.
I think I had 2 years I could go back and get my pension reinstated and everything. So I had an umbrella if I couldn't make it. And then when I went into graduate school, and when I wrote that master's thesis, which was published,
Mm-hmm.
and that was the first one at that time on police corruption.
Yeah, and what drew you? Because you started your work on police corruption very early as a graduate student,
Yeah.
and it was your experience as a police officer, or what drew you to be interested in doing research on that?
That's what did it, and that was that empirical typology that I developed described what was going on in Birmingham at the time I was there. And I've had several people, and even in print, people say Barker based this on what was found by the Knapp Commission.
Yeah.
I didn't know anything, damn thing about the Knapp Commission, and that was what I saw. And then I got to think, when I did hear about the
Right.
Knapp Commission of the officers, I said, "It's not just Birmingham,
You're right. Yeah, it's everywhere. And yeah, it is interesting. That was the first article you ever published, the Typology of Police Corruption, Roebuck and Barker. That's a classic. Anybody who's ever done writing on police corruption, you have to cite that piece. I mean, that's sort of a seminal piece on police corruption. It's rare to meet somebody whose first publication it's a classic, right? It's a classic on police corruption. Have you been surprised later on over the impact that article had?
Well, yeah, in a way I have, but then, it's just like, before you came in and I was talking to the young man over there and I was saying, I don't like to do crunch numbers. I like to, I want to describe what life is like, and that's what life was like. But then I realized most people didn't know that, And that's why it became a classic, because I was putting it out here. Hey, this is what's going on.
Yeah, and but it was very good because basically you organize experience in a very systematic way, and it just hadn't been done before.
Yeah.
But somebody had to be first, right? But then you make the decision to leave police work and become an academic.
Yeah.
Now that's a big change in lifestyle. And what prompted you to do that?
That's another funny story. I went to American Sociological Society meeting when I got my, I was ABD,
Okay.
and I was going to go look for a job. So I went out there looking for a job at the employment exchange, and they got all these jobs up there, and I began to see. That's when law enforcement. It wasn't criminal justice yet; it was just law enforcement. And I noticed that they had jobs advertised, sociology professors, but those that were law enforcement with law enforcement experience were $1,500 to $2,000. I said, "That's me now." So I went that way.
I got you. Right. All right. And yeah, because the field of criminal justice was really just starting as an academic, discipline as a field of study. So yeah, you were right there at the front door. So you went and you taught at Valdosta in Georgia for a couple of years, then over to Mississippi State for a short while, but then landed at Jacksonville State back in Alabama, and you were there for 22 years.
Yeah.
And why there, and what kept you there for that period of time?
Well, I wanted to go home,
Back to Alabama.
I wanted to go back to Alabama. And then things just started snowballing, And then at Jacksonville State, one of the things I'm very proud of in my life is I had a lot of young faculty came through there, and I developed most of them. Bob Bone.
Oh, sure.
And Ron Hunter was there for 10 years,
Mm-hmm.
and I helped them in their careers. And Bob came with me, ABD, and he later became a ACJS president.
Yes,
Ron became an ACJS president, and I became an ACJS president. So I think I've always, if I could help a young student, I would do it.
Mm-hmm.
And I've helped a lot of others along the way, and I think we owe that to the profession.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And then I just stayed there until I think that I left Jacksonville State. I was a dean for over 20 years. Nobody should ever be a dean for 20 years. So I promoted myself back to the faculty. And then when I got back to the faculty, I said, I want to try something else. And Vic Capler recruited me to go to Eastern Kentucky, and that was the only place I would go.
Oh, really? Yeah. So okay, that's an interesting turning point too. So you're at Jacksonville State for 22 years, and then you go to Eastern Kentucky.
Yeah.
So what was that process like? So Vic had a opening, and he was trying to recruit you, or what was it?
Yeah, he had it, and he kept it open a year for me to get things all tied up down in Alabama,
okay.
and move up there. So I moved up there, and the interesting thing about that is when I got up to Eastern Kentucky, I opened up a new field of study on biker gangs. And and I was telling the young man there, I've been often asked, well, why did you study biker gangs? And I always make the joke, well, it was less dangerous than studying police corruption.
Well, there you go. Because you have written a lot on police corruption, and that's what really launched your career as an academic, with some classic work on that. Then it seemed like in the 80s, you made a turn for a period. You did a lot on police pursuits. And was that inspired by, Tennessee versus Gardner sorts of issues, or because you wrote a lot, and a number of the article titles I love. It shows you have a gift for words. Some of your article titles are classics. Quick examples. These are from mostly from the 80s. BS and Buzzwords: The New Police Operational Style. Another one, The Termination Equation: Making Pursuits Safer. And then one you wrote on police lying. It's called Fluffing Up Evidence and Covering Your Ass. I mean, these are unbelievable titles of paper.
It was also at the time I wrote my first 3 novels.
Oh, back then?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know you did it so long ago.
And so, and like, you made the point, I've always written. Like, I just figure that, people would say, and I often tell people, say, I hear them say, oh, I would like to write a book, or I'm going to write a book, and every time somebody says, I want to strangle you. Because people, it's not that easy.
No, writing is very difficult, and I would think if you interviewed academics generally, most would say writing is the hardest part of the job.
But I love to do it, and I just...
Right, it comes easier for you for some reason, because you've had it from an early age.
I think where it comes easy for me was those journals I used when I write down the words that I couldn't understand.
Right, you build your vocabulary in a very quick way.
Yeah, so I just, and another interesting part of my life, we're living in Texas, San Antonio. And the reason why I retired from Eastern and went to San Antonio is our middle son is a single parent,
Oh, okay.
and he had a young child. So I retired and we went down there to help.
Oh, I see. Okay, yeah.
And now she is a writer too.
Oh, really?
She used to come in when we moved down there, and now when she goes in the office, when she's over at the house and goes in the office when I'm in there working,
Right.
if I'm reading, she gets her books out and sits down on the floor and reads. When I'm at the computer writing, she spreads her paper and she writes. And she'll do that, sitting there with me. Last year, she was in a statewide competition for writing at her age, and she's again this year. So I think that,
Yeah, it's running in the family. That's terrific. That's terrific. So your career is launched on police corruption issues. You do related things, police pursuits, other sorts of things, and then it seemed to really launch in the 2000s. Your work on outlaw motorcycle gangs,
yeah.
And in many ways it was kind of a right turn from all of your work. It was completely different topic. And you mentioned it was safer than doing police corruption research. But what got you interested and motivated to go in that direction?
Well, I got hanging around with bikers, and that's a real trip. And I was telling the gentleman too, my wife, you can bet that.
I have, yes.
And she's gone with me on the research. And I always tell the story. We were interviewing a biker leader, outlaw biker leader in Ohio. And we were sitting there, and we were in a bar. We were sitting, I'm on one side, and he's on the other, and Betsy's sitting there with me. And the guy says, he reaches in his pocket, pulls out his bag, rolls a marijuana cigarette, sitting right there, and then he starts, puffing on it. And put it down in the ashtray, and he says, "I'll be right back. I go to the bathroom." And he went in, and my wife said, "Tom, did you see that?" I said, "No, you didn't either." But so I got talking to them, and I could relate to them,
Yeah.
even though I was a former cop and everything. But I just got to where I could talk their language, and I never looked down on anybody in my life, even criminals. Now some of them I'd blow the brains out if I get a chance,
Yeah.
but they just took a turn, others didn't take.
Other direction, yeah. Yeah, and when you look at the work that you've done on that, you've written that most of these groups, these motorcycle clubs, are actually adult criminal gangs.
Yeah.
Who are selling drugs and involved in other kinds of illegal activity. You must have gotten some kind of reaction to those kinds of writing.
Oh yeah, I've been called a lot of names, but it's sad, and I've been threatened too.
Yeah, because of the motorcycle people I've talked to, that's not how they characterize themselves, obviously.
No, and but my favorite saying has been, and even when I was talking to cops, I said, bullshit the citizens, but don't try to bullshit me. And like if the bikers, they're always talking about this biker brotherhood.
Right.
If you go out and you live with them and you run with them, that brotherhood's a bunch of bullshit too. All you got to do is, arrest one of them, and they line up to tell on rat their other buddies out.
So the loyalty doesn't run very deep.
And where biker gangs changed with Sonny Barger and the Hells Angels in the 60s, when they started running drugs. When they started running drugs, the money was involved. There went the brotherhood.
I got you, right. Yeah. And you can say that's true of some mafia groups as well.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, loyalty went out the window pretty quickly.
Well, it's the same thing too, and I've dealt with a lot of crooked cops. They line up quick too. There's no brotherhood among cops. When you sit down and say you can do 30 or you can do 2.
Right. Yeah. Will you provide information? Right. Now, when you look at outlaw motorcycle gangs in general, it's kind of interesting. It's a regional phenomenon, and even around the world, as you know. Like you wouldn't predict it, but Canada has a significant number of outlaw motorcycle
That's
gangs.
the number one crime threat.
Yeah, you wouldn't think so. Said, well, given the climate up there, what are all these people doing on bikes? And Australia's got a significant motorcycle gang problem, and then a few other scattered places, like Sweden, for example. Yeah, how do you account for that? It's sort of how it sort of picks up in some places, but not in others.
Well, a lot of that is, what drug markets are available.
Oh, I gotcha.
So, the interesting thing about Canada, to understand Canada, you've got to understand their history. I don't know if you know this, Jay, but Canada's had a real problem with the Ku Klux Klan.
Oh, really?
Yes. Julian Scherer, that wrote that probably seminal book on the Hells Angels, Canadian Hells Angels, he also has written a book on the Klan in Canada.
Oh.
And I read that, and I've got the pictures of Klansmen from Canada and everything. They got a tie-in with America, so they have a large problem in Canada with white supremacists.
Oh, I see.
And most of those Canadian biker gangs are heavily populated with white supremacists. So it also went into crime. So Canada is different now. Australia's. I love Australia, and I love the Australians, and they're just kind of fun people around. If there was ever a biker brotherhood, it was in Australia, But Australia's got a big problem with it.
Yeah, they really do. Yeah, it comes up in every one of their organized crime reports as one of the top problems in that area. And so when you're working on all of this stuff. Now, have you ever come across in your interviews with bikers any who have read your work and realizing what you've concluded in your research about these gangs? Where they...
None that has told me right up front.
Okay, yeah.
Well, except one. I don't know if you ought to... I don't know if you're aware of it, but there's a biker blog out there called The Aging Rebel. You need to read that. Anybody that's into biker gangs should keep up with that. And he's also an expert witness, but he's pro bikers. Now, they know, and he knows about everything I've written. I've sent him my books, and he blogs about it sometimes. And a lot of those people that are, blog will, know my background, and they give me hell on that.
Oh, really?
I give them hell back. And the thing I tell them, you know who I am, but you don't have the guts to put your damn name on that what you said to me.
All right, so you give right back to them. All right. Well, good. More power to you.
Well, like I've always said, and I think you've heard me,
Right.
say this before, I'm too stupid to be afraid.
Well, no, and given the topics, the two of the major topics in your writing and research career has been police corruption and outlaw motorcycle gangs. So yeah, you could argue those are higher risk topics to be involved with, on their face. Now, when you look at your academic career at Jacksonville State and then at Eastern Kentucky, you were involved in teaching, a lot of administration, dean type work. Yet over the course of that time, you wrote, at least 4 or 5 police books, several books on outlaw motorcycle gangs, a bunch of articles. How are you able to do it? In other words, most people in administrative jobs, department chairs and up, complain they can't get research work done because of all the administration nonsense. So how are you able to keep that high rate of writing and research going?
Well, one of the things when I became a dean, I said, I'm still going to do my research, and I'm going to do my writing. And, that's why when I had a lot of faculty members come to me and I said, you got to get some publications out. And they said, well, I don't have time. I said, don't give me that, Jim. Because look what I'm doing, So, and it's just like, I belong to several writers groups there in San Antonio. And I don't cut them any slack. As people say, I don't have time. I said, wait a minute. Every day, write a paragraph. Write a paragraph. The next day, revise that paragraph. Start anew. Then the next day and the next day. But I said, if you do it every day, well, if you wrote a page a day, that's 365 pages a year. you know?
Yeah.
You've got time, but you have to find the time, you know?
Yeah, and it is true, and I would think for people living the academic life, that you hear more complaints about that than almost anything else.
Yeah.
The inability to write because of teaching and all the other stuff that.
Well, and one of the things that a lot of my books, incidentally, 18's last count. A lot of my books came from my class lectures.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I taught I don't know how many classes, and students say, "What book is it?" I said, "There's no book." And they say, "Well, what are we studying?" I said, if you want a book for this class, I'll assign you one to go over, and the bookstore and buy it. But anything I say may not be in that book or may contradict what's in it. So I wrote those class notes, ended up being books.
Yeah, because it is true, at the time you were working your way through the ranks of academia, the number of books out there was very small.
Well, Amber was the first intro to criminal justice.
Yeah.
And now you go down there and look, and everybody's got
There's
one.
more intro books than classes. Yeah, it is unbelievable now. All trying to convey the exact same material.
And
to
if I may
different
add there too, a lot of people, when they find out I write fiction,
Yeah.
well, I said, well, writing fiction in textbooks, it's not too big a jump.
Right, I get your point. But yeah, it is now. So then, all of a sudden you're preparing, you realize you're preparing your own notes for class, and then you realize, my notes are better than anything I can find out there.
Yeah.
So you turn.
Because I was,
Yeah.
and you've written books too, so
Sure.
you know it. You write a book and you send it off. When you send it off, it's 2 years behind. And then it's gonna take 2 more years to get it published. It's 4 years behind.
It's true. It's true, right? Yeah. So you're never really quite there, and that's the problem with this field. It continues to change, right? The Supreme Court keeps jumping into things, policies change, and cases break. But I guess that's part of what makes it interesting as well.
Well, it's fun too.
Yeah. It's the material is inherently interesting, which is a great attribute. And when you look over the course of your career, you've been recognized in a number of ways. You've won a number of awards. You've been president of the Southern Association of Criminal Justice, president of the Academy, received the Founders Award. Of all the recognition you receive, is there any that you're the most proud of?
I think being president of ACJS, that really has, and that. I think that the 2 things I did when I was president of ACJS that I think helped the Academy is one of the things is, I helped them in their organization a lot. And when I took over as president, they didn't have a line out of the budget. My administrative background, you can't, like, there was a line there that says meeting, and it was, let's make a figure, $28,000. I said, well, what was that $28,000 spent on? Well, on a meeting. I said, no, we got to break this down. And another thing, that I'm proud of, I started really bringing women into this group. We had Dorothy Bracey, who's been president for a while, but I had the first woman chair, Alita Merlot, Mitty Southern got appointed to their first, positions in ACGS. I did that.
Okay. Yeah.
So I was going to, my theory was,
And they both went on to become ACJS presidents down the road.
right. And I said it was the same thing, I looked at on police work, this good old boy network's got to end.
Yeah.
And the Academy is so much better now, I don't say it's because of me, it's
No,
not,
right.
but it's because of, it has evolved so much better.
Yeah, and throughout your career and your writing, that theme of social justice, things aren't right, they have to be right. From your earliest work on police corruption all the way through motorcycle gangs, things aren't what they seem to be. This is what's wrong. This is what needs to be done. where do you think you got that from? Was that just always inside you that, because there's a lot in your work that's always looking to point out the injustice that's not visible from the outside, and then why it has to be corrected. But you're always very pointed about that in your writing.
I don't know where it came from, except, maybe it came from my Catholic background, that, and really the things that, when I first went into service, and I think everything changed for me down in Mississippi when I saw that those 3 civil rights workers killed down there, and we were looking for them, and I saw those Klansmen and that. It's just one of those things that, when you say, if it ever get the chance to change, I'm gonna change this shit. Pardon my French.
No.
And then when I went on the police department, I drove them crazy. Why? Why are you doing this? Why are we doing this?
Yeah.
And it was always, well, because I said so. And I said, look, my dad tried that on me too. That didn't work.
Well, right, and you didn't fall in line, and you see a lot of these police corruption cases that are still going on in police departments here and there. It's people, a new officer comes on and sees what's going on in their precinct or whatever is corrupt behavior, but rather than make noise about it, they just fall in line and go along with it, and then of course they get wrapped up in it and get caught or something.
But I think one thing when I was a cop, it changed how they dealt with me there. I remember one time I went to a burglary, and I was there, and there was an officer there that was taking watches out of the glass case, put them in his pocket. I said, put them back. And he said, look at my badge number. I got a lower badge number. We went there. You looked at the badge number. You knew who was in charge.
Yeah.
I said, no. I said, put it back in. It's my damn burglar. You're not stealing here. He said, well, there ain't no way you can do it. I pulled my gun. I said, I'll blow your ass away right here. And he said, you wouldn't do that. And my partner said, yes, he will.
Well, right, and there aren't many, junior police officers who would ever do that to a senior police officer. So there has to be something in you that isn't in a lot of people to say, the line is drawn right here.
Yeah, I don't know what it is, but I just, it's always, my wife sometimes thinks I'm crazy, some of the things that I do, like she'll say, I wear bandanas, and she says, you're not gonna wear a bandana. Yes, I am. She says, well, why? I said, that's who I am. So I just, I'm having fun.
Well, you always have. You always have. Have you ever thought during your career, it's been a long and varied career, that there are paths you wish you would have taken that you didn't, or has it gone the way you think it should?
Well, that's one of the other things I've had in life. I don't look in the rear view mirror. That's over.
Okay, so you don't second guess decisions like that. Okay.
Only my personal relationships,
Yeah. Do you, wish something happened that didn't, or something like that? Yeah. So here we are in the 21st century, for God's sakes, and there are young people at meetings like this one. You always see a new batch of people you've never seen before. What would your advice be to people who are getting into the field of criminology, criminal justice, given where we are now?
Well, one of the things that I've always thought, if you're going to understand what's going on, know your history. I read history constantly. That's another thing my dad taught me, And then you see the same problems been faced before. And like, that BS and buzzwords, that's the point I was trying to make there. Every 4 or 5 years, here comes a new police strategy that's gonna, and they reinvent the wheel, and they continually going back and find out, what was said in 1829.
Right, yeah. They reinvent the fact, you have to talk to citizens and things like that.
So I think if I had to come back, if I could talk to all the young as scholars, as I would say, see if what you're dealing with today has been dealt with before and how it was dealt with before. And the only way to do that is read history. And I'm reading Grant now. I don't know if you've read that book.
No, I have not, no.
Oh, you need to read that.
Really?
It's one of those books that you can only read about 20 pages before you get a headache. But read 20 pages a day.
Right. And here you are at this point in career, having put in a long academic career, yet you're still actively writing. You're writing short stories now. You're actively working on novels now. And the theme of those, are they criminal justice themes primarily?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. And what got you toward doing the fiction as opposed to nonfiction?
Well, I remember, and you knew most of the guys, the ex-cops that used to hang around together, Sean Grennan and all of them,
Yeah.
And we used to sit around drinking tea and talking. And it always came down to one thing, the theme is, fairy tales start out, once upon a time. Police war stories start out, this ain't no shit, And most of this ain't no shit. You can tell it, any police officer in any department, in your department can tell the same story because it happens over and over again. So that's where the fiction came, and I said, and a lot of my fiction, when I send a query letter off, this was based on real life experience, and some that they don't know, it was real life, there's no fiction about it.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things that, people don't believe it.
Yeah, right. I don't believe it's true.
I remember one time I talked to one of the book posters, and I won't mention who it is, and we were going to meet Sean, Gary and I, Patty Ryan, Jack Douglas. We were going to all put together a series of stories, and we were going to call it, This Ain't No Shit. So I went down and talked to the book poster, and he said, the concept sounds good, but not the title, So I said, okay, how about Up Against the Wall, motherfucker?
They didn't go for that either, no. It would probably sell quite well, though.
It probably would.
Yeah, I know. It is unbelievable. So so what are you working on right now as we sit here? What are your writing projects?
Well, I've got a book down there, and right now on police sexual misconduct. That I'm gonna get that published, and I got another book coming out on outlaw biker gangs, and my latest project that I'm writing now is one I got a novel going called No Good Deed, and it's about a murder that I investigated years ago, and it's solving, but it's fictionalized.
Mm-hmm.
And then the research I'm doing now is on killer cops, and the killer cops is police officers who kill by premeditation. They're murderers, and there's a surprising number of them. So that's what I'm working on now.
Wow, so you are balancing all these projects, and you just work a little bit on each one as
Well,
time permits?
my day, I get up in the morning, and of course, I check the newspaper, I'm still alive, and I get to work, and I check my emails, and then I always devote at least an hour on each one of those.
Okay.
And then from 4 to 6, I read, history. Like I told you, I'm reading Grant. And then I also read, some novels then from 4 to 6. And then at 6, I go sit on the deck and drink beer.
All right. So you still have a very structured day in terms of,
Yeah.
getting work done, and
But if you don't start, you're not going to do it.
yeah, it just won't happen. Right? It won't happen at all.
And then after you've done it for so many years, then it's just a habit.
Yeah, it is amazing. And in terms of writing, do you set yourself a quota of how much writing you're going to do a day, or just
Yeah, I do. You know, I'm one of those. I figure on each one of those projects, page a day. You got to do a page a day. Now, as you well know, the books you've written, it always comes that there's a time you got to do more than that because you got a deadline.
Right, right. A page a day, right, is not going to get me there.
And then you get, if you write books, then while you're writing it, you're getting page proofs in from another one.
Oh, right, yeah, I know. And they always come at the worst time.
I've always said, you know, I don't mind, I like writing and I like sending them off. I don't like when they come back and all that other, you know.
Right.
And then again, people ask me, well, why'd you get out of academia? And I told them, I got about here with the bullshit, you know, academic bullshit. And I'm the kind of guy, and I used to tell people, I'm glad I never had a guy like me working for me.
Well, you have strong views, and I think what separates you from most is that you have no trouble expressing them to a supervisor, to a boss, to anybody.
That's right.
And that, I think, has become less common, where people don't say anything and they go along even though they're unhappy about it. Whereas you've always said, no, I don't agree with that, I'm not doing it.
You know, I famously said, you know, nobody tells me what to do. If I don't want to do it, I'm not going to do it. I don't care what you say. You know Carol Garrison.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
We were at a meeting one time and she was sitting there with the whole group of us, and you know, I said, Carol Garrison's the best boss I ever had. And she said, Tom Barker, you never had a boss.
Yeah, that's said very well. She was your boss and admitted she had no control.
But if I'm not going to do it, I'm not going to do it.
Well, I mean, that attitude has served you well over your career. I mean, because back in your days as a police officer, many officers wouldn't have the courage to do that because they'd be afraid they'd be singled out or drummed out or whatever. But it served you well, and then throughout your academic life, you're very successful, you know, up to and including a dean, for God's sake. So somehow you managed to navigate the flow of all those institutional constraints to do your thing.
Well, one thing, if you said what I'd change, I'd never be a dean for 20 years. That is crazy.
That is, yeah, and being a dean it hasn't gotten easier, right? The administrative load has always been crazy, but yeah, it's crazier because then you're dealing with other people's problems most of the day.
Yeah, you know, that's why I liked when I promoted myself back to the faculty. Only problems I ever mind.
Right. Oh, it's a much easier life, right? Because you come into the office as a chair or dean, what immediately faces you are other people's problems.
That's right.
So your work is, you know, pushed aside.
I knew I was in trouble when I first year as dean. The vice president for academic affairs said, you know, you have a budget, but you have to have it in my office by somebody. And he says, you know, it's zero line budget. What you need, but not anymore. I said, okay. So I worked out my budget, handed it in. He said, okay, now you got to cut it by 10%. I said, you don't do a goddamn zero line budget and cut it by 10%, you know. I said, if you said that, I'd put 10% in, you know. And let me tell you a funny story.
Sure.
I'd been on a dean for about 2 months. The vice president called. And I had gotten late in that morning. And he says, my secretary said, you know, the vice president has called, going to saw you. And I told him we weren't here yet. So I called and I said, Dr. McGregor, I'm here. Oh, the late dean is here. And he started on me, man. You know, you got to do better than this and all that. And he was raising his voice, and I said, wait a minute. I said, nobody talks to me like that over the phone. I'll be in your office as soon as I can get over there. And I got out of there, went over to his office, and went in the office, and he said, Tom, sit down.
Yeah. Different tone of voice.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't care who, nobody talked to me.
Right, and that was your boss on the phone, yeah. Well, that was good, yeah, so that attitude has run through, really throughout your whole life. Yeah, throughout your whole life. And it looks like it served you quite well.
Oh, well, like I said, I've been having fun.
Well, and as Carol Garrison, her comment was the best, you know, you've never had a boss. And that's great to hear from somebody who is your supervisor. That is great.
She was, but even though she said she wasn't my boss, she was good to work for.
Yeah, yes.
And I guess it's good to work for. She always, you know, she lets you do what you want to do. And if you're an employee that's not going to do anything wrong, she's not going to have to get on you.
Right, yeah. Yeah, no, she was good. Very good person. Now, is there other things that you would like to raise that we might not have gotten to at this point?
I can't think of it, you know. I don't think, it's amazing to me. You know, I think I was president, you know, what was it, 30 years ago. And now I come to this meeting here. There's a lot of people you know, and I see the young faces. I remember we were sitting at a bar last night. There was 2 groups of them over there, of ACJS people. We were at that German place down here, you know, and they were just, you know, and Betsy turned around and she says, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm watching them." I said, "Look at it." I said, "Man, they're really having fun, you know." And I said, and they were, I could hear them discussing criminal justice issues, and I was thinking, man, that's the way to do it. Get drunk and talk about it. But I'm so proud of them, and like I say, you know, I see people, you know, looking at my badge and it says past president, and they're looking at, when?
That's true. Well, the field has come a long way, and certainly a good chunk of it is due to people like you who, at the very beginning, when you know there was no books and you know police corruption literature was in its infancy and all these things, you know, somebody had to build that.
And I also remember, I'll tell you know, even when I first went to Jacksonville State, it was the College of Law Enforcement. And I didn't like that. I said, that's got to change. You know, it's not the College of Law Enforcement. And I kept trying to get change the name, and they couldn't get the name changed. And that's when we were moved from law enforcement into criminal justice.
Right.
And then one night at a banquet, I was at the front table, and the president of the university was talking about changes in the university. And they were going to rename some colleges. And right before he got up, said, "We're going to rename the College of Law Enforcement. What should it be?" I said, "The College of Criminal Justice." He went right up there and he
Changed it immediately.
Yeah.
Oh, that's terrific. Yeah, that's terrific. And where do you see the field itself going? Do you think the field is going in the proper direction, or needs a change of course, you know, as an academic, you know, field of study?
Well, it's an academic field of study. I think it's going in the one thing that we still not. Criminal justice should not be studied as American criminal justice. You know, we don't have an international component developed as we should. And it was just today I was in there at a meeting, you know, at a round table on police sexual misconduct. And I told the guys, you know, there, you know, Philip Stenson, Bob Taylor was there, and John Lauterbach, I think is his last name. And I told them, the mistake you guys are making is you're not looking, you're thinking about police sexual misconduct in the United States. And I said, it's not a United States problem. I said, the book that I've got coming out deals with the United States and England. It started in England, and it's occupational culture, which I said, any democratic society has the same damn problems because of the foundation of it. And until we start studying it that way, we're not going to get to the core issue or the core problems that are affecting criminal justice. It's not just the United States.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a fair point. And most of the things we've done over here, we've taken from other cultures anyway, you know, law-wise and criminal justice process-wise. So there aren't many original ideas.
Well, it's something, you know, how we've developed. I've seen you develop too. I mean, I remember the first articles you came out on organized crime,
Oh, sure, yeah.
and that seemed like 50 years ago.
It does seem like 50 years ago. Right, but things change, right? The world
right.
changed, right? Berlin Wall came down. All kinds of important things happened, and yeah, you can't be doing the same thing you were doing, 30 years ago. And that's really an important lesson. It's an important lesson.
Well, look at the current debate we got, on mass shooting issues. It's been saying that for years. Say the same thing. And it comes up, I saw one of those politicians say, we can't even get through, that say people on terrorist watch list can't buy, handguns. I said, how many people on the terrorist watch list have been involved in mass school shootings?
Well, it's finding ways to avoid facing the underlying problem. Yeah, no, it's very true, yeah.
And then they also, one of the things, we can't allow 19-year-olds to buy guns. You go in the army and carry a damn automatic weapon or machine gun at 18, You those kinds of things that you're sitting around your neighbors and drinking beer may sound good,
Yeah, right, but it doesn't make good policy. No.
But then, and I also told them, on the police sexual misconduct, we keep engaging in congressional research, saying things that sound good.
Yeah, the political influence on criminal justice has been a continuing problem.
But I think ACJS is going to eventually move into, and ASC is getting there somewhere, making policy.
Right.
Influencing policy. And Ron Akers and I, years and years ago, we sat down one time, and at that time I was big into ASC, and he said, Tom, you and I need to make up our mind where we want to go. Said you're more practical, more professional, all right. You might want to go ACJS, and I want to go ASC, and I said that's what I want to do, and that's why I went ACJS.
Mm-hmm. That's right, and Ron also had a great career.
Oh yeah.
Great career, yeah. It's fabulous stuff. Well, Tom, I'd like to thank you for spending the time with us, and for the viewers. I appreciate your work and your willingness to share it with the viewers. Thanks very much, Tom.
I ought to get a free beer out of this.